Wilma Rudolph was an American sprinter who became the first American woman to win 3 gold medals in track and field at the same Olympic game. Through her hard work and determination, Rudolph was able to overcome polio as a child to later claim 3 gold medals in the 100-meter dash, 200-meter dash, and 4x1 meter relay race in the 1960s Olympic game. Rudolph is now known as a world record-holding Olympic champion, an international sports icon in track and field, and a civil rights and women's rights symbol. Rudolph's achievements overall gave her the title of the fastest woman alive. Without Wilma Rudolph, track and field would have remained a predominantly white and male-dominated sport in the Olympics today. George W. Johnson was an American singer and pioneer sound recording artist by becoming the first African American recording star. He developed his musical ability and even learned to read and write while in slavery in the mid to late 1800s. After he was freed from slavery, Johnson moved to New York and lived off being a street whistler. Johnson was recruited by 2 different regional phonograph distributors who were looking for recording artists to test out their devices. Known for his whistling tunes, Johnson's first recordings for both companies was the popular comedy novelty song called The Whistling Coon. If Johnson had not been the first known recording artist to test out the phonograph device, then we would have not been able to create current-day recording studios, which brought us some of our favorite songs to this day.
George Telefero was a football star at Indiana University, a rare African American player. He routinely faced racism on and off the field. In 1949, he became the first black player ever drafted in the NFL. He was selected by the Chicago Bears. Without George Telefero's marks in the world by making it to the NFL, it could have been many years before the NFL would draft an African American player. Ralph Johnson Bunchy was an American political scientist and diplomat who received the 1950 Nobel Peace Prize for his late 1940s mediation in Palestine. He was the first person of color to be so honored in the history of the prize. He was involved in the formation and administration of the United Nations, and in 1963 received the Medal of Freedom from President John F. Kennedy. Without Ralph Johnson Bunchy's tremendous accomplishments, the United Nations would not have had an African American involved in the formation of the worldwide organization.
Henry Blair was the second African American to earn not 1, but 2 patents. Henry Blair is most renowned for his invention of the corn planter and mechanical cotton planter. These inventions changed the game for planters back then and even today. Overall, without Henry Blair, farmers would still be hand planting their crops and it would be consuming so much time and energy. Ebony is a monthly magazine that focuses on news, culture, and entertainment that targets the African American community. Its coverage includes the lifestyles and accomplishments of influential Black people, fashion, beauty, and politics. Without the creation of Ebony, a lot of the accomplishments of influential African Americans would have continued to be overlooked in the media.
After he graduated high school, the Ohio State governor at the time appointed Charles Young to be the first lieutenant of the 9th Battalion. This group was named the Ohio State Volunteers, which was also an all-black men battalion. At the end of the war, he stayed at his position as the first troop lieutenant. Young was then promoted to captain in the regular army, which made him the first black man to become a captain in the military. Sadly, one day, Charles caught a bad disease which eventually led to a kidney infection and his death. While alive, he earned the prestigious NAACP Springer Medal for his bravery. Without Charles Young, many young black men would not have the courage to join the military. James Farmer was the man who created and organized the freedom rides during the civil rights movement. He was also the head of a leading civil rights organization called CORE, which was the Congress of Racial Equality. A freedom rider was someone who rode an interstate bus from an unsegregated state into a southern segregated state and disregarded the fact that riding segregated buses were unconstitutional. However, These buses were segregated, except only blacks were allowed on. Without farmers' first initial idea of having freedom riders, the civil rights movement would not have been as easily overturned, although the movement was not as easily swayed.
John Arthur Johnson, nicknamed the Galveston Giant, was an American boxer who became the first African American world heavyweight boxing champion during the Jim Crow era. As Johnson became more popular as a boxer, he faced more racism and prejudice than he did growing up. His 1910 fight against James J. Jeffries was dubbed the fight of the century, and his ultimate victory led him to be the most famous and notorious African American on earth for the following decade. Without the efforts of John Johnson, boxing would have continued to be a segregated sport. Wallace Wally Amos Jr. is the founder of famous Amos chocolate chip cookie, the Cookie Kahuna, and Aunt Della Cookie Gourmet cookie brands. Because his Aunt Della will bake him cookies, Amos found his passion and will later develop his own chocolate chip cookie recipe. He then owned a store where he sold his cookies and was eventually able to start an entire company. The company began to expand to the point where famous Amos chocolate chip cookies could be found on supermarket shelves across the United States. If it weren't for Wally Amos and his love for his Aunt Della's cookies, we would have never come to know the delicious treat that is famous Amos cookies.